Alright, welcome back to the AOR Project Cars 2 GT3 Tier 2 League on PC. This is Season 10, and we are at Round 7 at Catalunya. Welcome. Excuse me for those minor technical difficulties. This is my first time doing this alone. I am your host, Fistophelese, and sadly, Insolventus cannot join me today because he had other plans. I'm not going to disclose what those are because I do respect his privacy, but I do believe he will be back next week. As it is right now, we are looking at a practice session just before the race is going to start. Today, being at Catalunya, is another 90-minute race, which means there will be no qualifying and reverse grids. For those reverse grids, I can already state that we do have a new addition to the league. At least I do believe he has not raced before, at least not while I was here. And his name is WMDR Martin. So, shoutouts to him for joining the league. The grid for today will be... I will disclose that once we start the formation lap. And thus far, I'll just pull up the standings so that you can see where the drivers are at and how they are faring. As you can see, Nui is still in first place, even after that weaker round at Brno last week. Marley in second, and Clown, our race winner from last week, in third, followed just barely by Shaggy Dan, who's only 8 points behind Clown, his teammate. Those two are followed by Arsik, Dakuza, Ricky Brush, Midweek Coma, and Lusty. Rounding out the top 10 is Smolda. For 11th in the championship is Shooter, followed by Oblator, S4 Howie. Danny VD Mir has moved on to the Tier 1 league. John Beauregard, I do not believe has moved on, but he is not racing in Tier 2 anymore. Baratis, with a did not finish last week. And following him is our Matster, Storment, Gosku, Glenn Alds 81, who has not started in the last 3 races, so he might not be coming back. And Mickisby. Ticklish Picklewickle having come back last week and finishing in 13th position, followed by the GW and Dangerous Janetta. Following those two are Doc, DeWoo, Nicholas Domino, a new addition, Porta, although I do not know if we will see him today, and our newest driver here, WMDR Martin. Here we can just see Martin joining the track. So let's go on board with him. Let's see how he does. As we have to realize that the laps these guys are pulling out right now are probably not what we'll be seeing in qualifying, as I do believe they would be more likely to practice for the coming race instead of qualifying, which is not going to happen. Catalunya being a very special track, as it is very technical and very hard on the tires. The race will start at 6 AM local time, and I do not believe we will see anybody going on the soft tires. Due to the nature of this race being a 1.5 hour race, we will see everybody pit for fuel. The question is how much each of the drivers has decided to take on board and when they will come into the pits. Mathematically speaking, it would be the best to pit as late as possible so you can run as little fuel as possible for the longest time. But we don't know how the track will change, the track conditions will change, and if the track will get slower or faster towards the end of the race. So we'll be we'll get ready for a very exciting round here. As we can see, the practice session is now over. This is the last lap for all the drivers. As we can see, everybody coming into, possibly coming into the pits. Some drivers choosing to not use that button. Now we're on with Shaggy Dan. Just watching him complete his lap, or the lap, possibly one of the last drivers to complete a lap in the practice session. And then we'll promptly head onto the grid, at which point I will disclose the starting order. Alright. As at the moment there is very little to commentate. It's going well, I would say. As I've mentioned this before, I believe, but this season I couldn't join the racing, so I decided to do the next best thing, and as it looks with my university schedule, I'll probably not be able to race the next season either. The question that still remains is, will I be home during the times that that season 11 is, like, the races are scheduled for season 11, so that I could be, or potentially be, the co-commentator again, but so far I haven't heard from my university, so that's still in the clouds, I guess. Alright, as we are now on the grid, we are waiting for the drivers to choose their setups for this race, and now I will state the pecking order, or the qualifying. That has not been done, but first is Gosku, followed by Madster, Baratis, and S4 Howie. In 5th and 6th position are Ablator and Shooter 80, respectively. Following them is Smolda, Lusty, Midweek Coma, Ricky Broche, Dakuza, Arsik, and Shaggy Dan. In 14th and 15th, we'll find Clown and Marley. In 16th and 17th, Nui and Mickisby. Rounding out the last slots are Stormint and Ticklish Picklewickle, and I do believe that WMDR Martin, who is not yet on this timesheet that I have here, will start from the very back, as he has not participated in any of the races before and not scored any points. I don't believe Midweek Coma is you are not here today, so that moves everybody from 10th to 19th up one position. And the cars are on the grid officially now. Now we'll just have to wait for them to form up. You can see the drivers moving out of the way as to make as much room in the middle as possible for the drivers coming up to the front as they can. So you can just see Gosku in first place, followed by Madster, like I have just said. Going very slowly so that all the drivers can catch up to by the end of the first sector. By that, after all the drivers have caught up, the formation lap will proceed as per normal, and the race will start once the leader decides to step on the gas in the acceleration zone. The formation point is after the right-hand turn just before the final chicane of the racetrack, and the formation point is just after the corner, or the right-hand corner we can see in the back. So it'll be interesting to see where Gosku decides on making a run for it. Coming through turn 3 very slowly. As you can see them weaving a little bit, trying to keep a bit of that warmth in the tires so they do not cool too much on this very, very long wait for the race to start. As you can see right now, Gosku having stopped and waiting for everybody to form up, with WMDR Martin, like I had assumed, very far in the back. Today we have a grid of 17 drivers, which is actually much smaller than I had anticipated. But it might mean that we will see more small groups fighting for positions. As it is right now, I do believe that everybody who finishes this race would score a point. As you can see right now, Mick is B on the screen, the only Renault in this tier of AOR GT3, followed by Stormet and Ticklish Picklewickle in the only Porsche. Gosku now starting the proper formation lap, not being allowed to go above 120 kilometers an hour, I believe. Let's watch his speedo. It does look like the 120 kilometers an hour. Alright. Again, you can see the cars weaving around, just trying to keep those tires a bit warmer than they would be if you just drove the car straight. Just retain a bit more of that heat so they can brake late into the first corner and not lock up under the braking. Alright. It is a much safer way of placing this. Alright. This is the formation point where the cars go side by side. The odd numbers will go on the right side of the track, with the even numbers on the left side of the track, as the first corner is a right-hander, and the first, or the qualifying winner in this case, the first place car, does have the right to the inside line. As we're coming down to the straight, we'll just wait for Gosku to accelerate. When does he decide on going? And race 7 is underway. Can Gosku actually make up a bit of ground and make sure that Madster can attack him into turn 1 and turn 2? It looks like he has gotten off to a good start, with Oblator also coming off of the line fairly well, going in the inside of Madster. Can Oblator make it stick? It looks like he still has the outside line and the inside line into turn 3, which will give him the advantage. It looks like Oblator is just past Madster, and as for Howie is looking up the inside of Madster as well, but he does not have the pace. And he's actually going up the inside of Madster and the outside of Oblator. That is quite the move. There was a bit of contact between S4 Howie and Madster. I don't think that this would warrant a penalty, but we will see after the race. At the moment, we still have Gosku actually capable of pulling off a bit from the first pack, with Oblator just behind them, followed by S4 Howie, Smolda, and Dakuza, with Shaggy Dan having already moved up to 6th position. From his starting, I believe, 10th? So, a great start for Shaggy Dan. He is currently 4th in the championship, and the furthest up of any of the first 4 drivers, so Nui having a troublesome start, being handed through to the rear, it looks like. Struggling on the very early portions of this race, with Clown, our last race's winner, in 8th. At the moment, it'll be very likely that we'll see some moves down into turn 1 with a very long train of cars, just everybody following Gosku, who seems to have a bit of a gap to Oblator, so he probably won't be attacked. But Smolda might think about having a look outside of the inside of S4 Howie, but not actually going for that move. So, as it looks now, we have a group of 8 cars rounding up, fighting for that first position, with Gosku, Oblator, S4 Howie, Smolda, Dakuza, and Shaggy Dan, Arsik, and Clown. With Oblator being very close to Gosku at the moment, he probably wants to get past him so he can get into that clean air and show everybody the pace that he's been struggling to have this season. With Oblator putting Gosku very much under pressure into the downhill section of the second sector, he might have a look up the inside on the braking of the back straight, with the power from that Merc being very powerful car. Going down the inside, can he make it stick? It looks like he has a better line into the left-hander following the hairpin, and he does end up making the move stick. So we've just seen Oblator move past Gosku into position 1. Following those two are S4 Howie, Dakuza, Smolda, Shaggy Dan, Arsik, and Clown, who will probably be looking to pass each other to get as much track position as they can as early on as they can. With Shooter having already gotten a penalty, it seems, he might have got extended a bit too far or cut a corner, and Arsik is making a move on Shaggy Dan around the outside. He will have the inside line into turn 2. There was a bit of contact between the two. It doesn't look like they have any damage, but Shaggy Dan now coming under fire from his teammate Clown, the last race's winner and third man in the standings. He surely wants that position, and he's probably not afraid of fighting for it, even if the two of them are teammates. Shaggy Dan still hanging on to that 7th position, with Arsik hitting Smolda and taking him out, it looks like, which promotes Shaggy Dan and Clown into 6th position, and Marley, who's snuck up behind the two of them as well, currently 3rd in the standings, or 2nd in the standings, excuse me. And Madster actually going up the inside of Shooter, but does not decide to take the dive bomb, but might actually lose the position out to Nui, who seems to have gotten his pace under control, who's followed very closely by the new addition to the season, WMDR Martin, who seems to be having a very good first few laps. Coming up from the very back of this grid, 17th position, already in 11th. With Dakuza being very close to S4 Howie and probably making a move up into turn 1. And he goes down the inside, but decides not to actually make that move. With Shaggy Dan actually having lost the position to his teammate Clown, the two of him now fighting to not get passed by Marley, who surely wants to get ahead of him so he can be as close to his championship rival in 3rd position, namely Clown. Madster still being followed by Nui and WMDR Martin. WMDR Martin looking very strong in these first few laps. As it looks now, Clown has actually caught up to S4 Howie, So it'll be very interesting to see what he'll do. And Dakuza actually letting past S4 Howie. It looks like he has actually cut the corner or gotten a terrible exit onto the back straight, and now he's under fire from Clown as well. Losing that position, and there's contact between Dakuza and Clown. This will surely damage both of their cars. And Shaggy Dan and Marley are the laughing thirds in this battle, with S4 Howie still hanging on to that third position. Gosku's still in second, and Oblator extending his lead in first. With Shaggy Dan actually losing his position to Marley. Followed closely by Shooter, Matster, and Nui. WMDR Martin up to 9th from 17th. And it is only 6 laps into round 7 of AOR GT3 Tier 2. Nui having seemingly lost his position to WMDR Martin into turn 1 and 2. And my camera seemingly following Matster. Interesting. Nui probably wanting to take that position back is showing himself in the mirrors, putting WMDR Martin under pressure. But he is himself now under pressure from Dakuza, who just had a collision with Clown, who himself is in 14th position now. Followed closely by Arsik and Mikisby. Dakuza going very wide on the top of the exit of the top of the hill right-hander, losing a lot of time, with Nui trying to go around the outside of WMDR Martin, but he can't actually make the move stick. With Shooter coming under fire, possibly from Matster, and possibly being close enough to attack Shaggy Dan in the next few laps. Let's have a look at Ricky Broche and his group here, following Ticklish Pickle Wickle. And Smolda, who had the contact in lap 2, I believe, with Arsik. Both of them having been passed down the order. And Arsik now being behind him, as well as being behind Clown, so that's not a very good start off to their races. Ricky Bush taking a very wide line into turn 3, possibly getting a bit of understeer, and my camera again panning to Matster. It is very much like this game wants me to watch what he's doing, so let's have a look. Matster currently in 7th position. I do believe he has started in 2nd. So not a terrible getaway from him, considering the firepower that is the top of this league at the moment. With Shooter going very slow into the chicane, it seems, but not slow enough to give Matster room to attack him. Currently the battle for 7th position, it looks like, or 6th position between Shooter, Matster, WMDR Martin, Dakuza, and Nui. Dakuza, who has already passed our championship leader Nui, and Arsik going very defensive, it seems, into turn 1, or letting another car pass. He seems to be going very, very slowly. Let us move up to the front, where Shaggy Dan is closing the gap to S4 Howie and possibly having a look to go past him as soon as he can so he can close that gap to Marley. With Shaggy Dan going up the inside of a downhill section into Sector 2 and making that move stick. Now, does he actually have enough pace to cut away from that very long train that has formed behind him and S4 Howie? A train of 6, 7 cars, and Shooter possibly having a better exit out of that top of the hill right-hander. Possibly going out the inside of S4 Howie, but not actually deciding to go through with it. With WMDR Martin having passed the Kuza on the back straight into the braking zone of the hairpin, the left-hand hairpin, now in 8th position. A stunning drive from WMDR Martin so far, from 17th to 8th. But he possibly has to go very, very defensive into the first corner, with the Kuza being right on his tail. But let's not forget the brutal straight line speed that Lamborghini has, with WMDR Martin going very defensive very early, with the Kuza having a slipstream from Madster. Can he make a move stick around the outside into turn 1? They're still side by side into turn 2. Still side by side into turn 3. But WMDR Martin has the stickier inside line, and he keeps his position. But now Dakuza is coming under fire from Nui, who might have a bit more pace going the inside. That is not Nui, that is still Madster. But Nui not actually making that move, with Dakuza and WMDR Martin being side by side again. And there's a bit of contact between the two. Dakuza and Dub passing WMDR Martin, but being slow in the exit of that corner, with WMDR Martin coming up side by side with him again. These guys are fighting half a lap just next to one another. With Dakuza having finally passed WMDR Martin, it seems. But if he gets a bad exit out of that turn, he might get under fire from the very, very fast Lambo of WMDR Martin. With WMDR Martin being under fire from Nui, and Nui actually coming under fire from Ticklish Picklewickle, who must be smiling just seeing these guys lose lap time after lap time, or lap times, because they're fighting so very hard. When Ticklish Picklewickle possibly coming under fire from Ricky Brush Racing, who, shout out to him, is a staple who bring into the community, who brought very many drivers into AOR. So thanks to him. Nui going defensive, trying to defend from Ticklish Picklewickle, who has the outside line into turn 1. Gives him enough room and does not make the move stick around the outside, and concedes his position back to Nui. With Shooter having also passed S4 Howie at this point. And trying to fare very closely behind Shaggy Dan. Marley, who is now very close to Gosku. And Gosku actually losing it! And Marley is up to 2nd position. And Shaggy Dan is into 3rd. A very good drive from these two. Fighting for some of the very top positions in this championship, and already very high on the leaderboards again. Followed very closely by Shooter. And Madster following S4 Howie very closely, having a look up the inside of the hairpin, but not deciding to go for it. With just behind them are Dakuza and WMDR Martin, who has kept his position from Nui and Ticklish Picklewickle. With Madster driving a very consistent race at the moment, not losing too many positions, but not gaining many of them on track, but through mistakes from other drivers. Madster having a good exit out of turn 1 and the slipstream. You might actually have a look up the inside of S4 Howie. into turn 1, but he's too far away. Let's have a look up the fight for 10th position between 4 or 5 cars, all fighting for 10th position. Some of the fastest guys in this league at the moment, namely Dakuza, Arsig, and Clown, as well as Ricky Brosh and Smolda are also here. Smolda going past Ricky Brosh, and Arsig actually sticking up the inside of Dakuza, but hitting Ricky Brosh, not slowing down fast enough, and taking both of them out in the process. Now back to last position. With Dakuza and Clown profiting from such a dangerous move. With Clown actually coming under fire from Gosku, and Gosku actually having to defend from Mickisby. Mickisby trying to go around the outside of the hairpin, and Gosku not getting a great exit, but still having the inside line. But Mickisby hanging in around the outside and making the move work. Incredible driving by Mickisby right here. Dakuza is seeming actually having lost some positions as well to WMDR Martin, Nui, and Ticklish Pickle Wickle, it seems. So it looks like he's had an issue or a spin. With Matster coming under fire from S4 Howie now, as he's already passed the man. As we've just received, Stormit has had to retire from the race due to frame rate issues, which is very, very disappointing indeed for him. Currently, there's still being a very, very close fight for the 7th or 6th position, which has gone to WMDR Martin at this point, who this far has been the driver of the day, going from 17th into 6th position so far, and I have the gut feeling that he's not going to stop here. With S4 Howie possibly coming under fire from Nui into the hairpin on the back straight, as well as Ticklish Pickle Wickle trying to attack Smolda, and S4 Howie going wide. Very odd scenes right here at the moment, as Nui was going very slow on the exit of that hairpin. Possibly trying to keep himself from getting a penalty. WMDR Mart actually being very close to Matster now, trying to go for that 5th position possibly. This car's seemingly very stable and very controlled under braking. Followed just by New, he was up into 7th position at this point, having started very, very far in the back, even further back than having started the furthest back of the drivers that have completed, completed all races this season, and currently being number 1 in the standings. Them seemingly struggling with this and the last track that we have raced at, coming in 9th position last race, I believe. But being the only man to have won 2 races thus far in this season. Smolda now having a look up possibly the inside of S4 Howie into the hairpin on the back straight, but not deciding to go for it. But possibly trying to make it stick into turn 1 later on the next lap. WMDR Martin now very close to Madster, and he's putting him under pressure, and it looks like he'll have a much faster exit down onto the start-finish straight, and have a look down the inside of turn 1 possibly. And Ticklish Picklewickle going off of the track at the final corner. WMDR Martin not making a move up the inside into turn 1, but staying very close to Madster. Almost close enough for the cars to touch. With Ticklish Picklewickle seemingly having an issue. It looks like his car has some damage, as if he's been hit from behind. It seems fairly unstable. Now coming under fire from Ricky Brush, who was earlier taken out by Arsic, who is still in last position, but trying to take it from Goska, who was actually running a very good race up until the spin he has had. He was in second position as that happened, but he seems to have made few more mistakes that put him very far down the order. With Madster having been passed by WMDR Martin, and now possibly coming under fire from Nui as well. WMDR Martin now being in 5th position, having made up 12 spots in 14 laps into this race. Possibly the drive of his life at the moment. A very fast driver indeed. With Marley actually starting to gain time on Oblator, who was 7 seconds ahead of Marley when Marley moved up into second position from the mistake that Goska had made. But Marley having much faster lap times than any of the drivers around him, being the only driver currently in the 145s. WMDR Martin lapping a 47.0 on his last lap, possibly due to the fighting with Madster. Madster now being attacked by Nui, which Nui going out the inside of turn 2 and outside of turn 3 possibly. No, he's making a switchback move into turn 3. Now he has the inside line into turn 4, and Arsic has just parked his car on the on the entry of turn 4. Has he had a disconnect, or has he decided not to race anymore? But this is certainly very dangerous from Arsic, it looks like, as it doesn't appear to be, to me, that his car has ghosted. With Smolda now possibly having a look to overtake S4 Howie, and Mickesby trying to capitalize on that as well. Mickesby actually having moved up to 10th position so far, starting down in apparently Arsic has lost connection as well, or VR problems it looks like. Yes, it looks like Arsic is out of the race as well. Mickesby being in 10th position at this point, Smolda in 9th, and S4 Howie in 8th. Nui's having overtaken Madster, and possibly trying to hunt down WMDR Martin at this point. Marley still closing a bit of that gap. It looks like I have some director issues. I can't actually view the screen of Marley. Here we go. Let's go on board with the man himself currently leading the race, namely Oblator. Possibly trying to control his pace as to not use too much fuel and keep his tires in good condition to possibly spurt during the closing stages of this race. And as it appears, Arsic has had his VR die on him, so he has had an unfortunate turn of events here. This looks like it does appear that your car has indeed disappeared from the track. With Uploader actually gaining a bit of time against Marley and Shaggy Dan as well, but Shaggy Dan actually putting out a very fast 45.9 at the moment, followed by Shooter and WMDR Martin, who certainly want to close that gap, who possibly is actually pulling Nui with him along as well. Currently we have 15 drivers left, with only seemingly 2 battles on track, namely Ticklish Picklewickle being very close to Mickisby at the moment, and Nui being very close to WMDR Martin. Mickisby actually being fairly close to S4 Howie to make something happen over the next few laps. But Ticklish Picklewickle actually being very close into turn 3. Might have a look at the inside of into turn 4. Again, currently we have director's issues, as it seems, as it always into turn 4 the camera seems to jump to a car that I am not viewing or a car that is not on track anymore. With Ticklish Picklewickle putting Mickisby very much under pressure and possibly go around the inside of the uphill right-hander, but deciding not to do that. He probably will have a look up the inside of the back straight hairpin, if he can make it work. As it appears right now, we do not have much fighting going on track, as stated before. The race has settled into its flow at the moment. Once the drivers will start coming into the pits, I do believe we will have some more exciting things to watch as Mickisby dives into the pits after S4 Howie has had a terrible exit out of the chicanes. Let's see what Mickisby actually decides on doing, as Ticklish Picklewickle does not seem to be close enough to actually make a move on S4 Howie, at least into turn 1. Let's have a look. Mickisby not deciding to change his tires, only refueling the car and possibly repairing some of the damage. Mickisby now having been passed by Dakuza and Clown, who have had very, very bad races so far, it looks like. And now being passed by Ricky Brush as well. Ricky Brush having been taken out earlier, but still bravely deciding to march on in 13th position, trying to get as many points as he can here, as all of the drivers currently competing will receive points. With Nui now being very close to WMDR Martin, and possibly having a look up the inside when the time comes into turn 1. With Smolder now actually being fairly close to Madster, it seems. But not close enough to make anything work. Ticklish Picklewickle also not being close enough to S4 Howie to actually make a move. Smolder possibly having the pace to close that gap to Madster and make a move next lap. And Ticklish Picklewickle actually making a move up the inside of turn 4, going past S4 Howie, which we currently can't see as we have issues with the director. As for how possibly having a look at the inside of turn 5, but not going for it. Deciding to slot in behind Ticklish Pickle and possibly taking a draft. Albator actually having lost some time to Marley in the last few laps, as he has closed the gap from 5 seconds to 3.8 seconds. But losing some of that time on the straights, apparently, as if he's had some issues with overheating the engine, possibly. Nui still being very close to WMDR Martin. Looks like these two may have gone into a stalemate formation in which they've... Nui has decided not to attack WMDR Martin, so that they can maximize the pace that both of them have. Nui possibly deciding to go on inside of turn 4, but not actually making a move. Smolda now being very close to Madster, close enough to make a move. Madster understeers on the mid-corner turn 4 and gives Smolda enough room on the outside of turn 5 to actually try and make a move. And Smolda has the better exit out of turn 5 and passes Madster. Madster still going fairly strong in 8th position. Just driving his race, not making very big mistakes, trying to get as many points as he can. Going back to the stalemate between these two, you can see not much happening at the moment. Ricky Broch having actually collected a penalty now as well. And as for how he possibly being... coming closer to Ticklish Pickle again so that he can make a move in the coming laps. With Madster actually losing some time into Smolda, not being able to pick up that draft and just stay close behind him and increase his lap time. With Nui possibly having a look around the inside or just showing himself to WMDR Martin in a way of saying, hey, I'm still here. If you're gonna lower your pace, I'm going to attack you. Both drivers driving very stable races, just going up the order as much as they can. Again, WMDR Martin being in 5th position from starting 17th. Last man on the grid is now in 5th position. And possibly coming under attack from Nui, who seems to want to pick up the pace a bit. And WMDR Martin going very wide on that exit and losing time, losing quite a bit of time, possibly getting a penalty if he does not slow down on the straight. With Nui maybe having a look around the outside of that chicane, WMDR going very deep and parking it on the apex so that Nui can't actually do a switchback move on him. So Nui's still being stuck behind WMDR Martin, who has not gotten a penalty for losing it and going a bit off of track down there in Sector 2. Just go on board with Nui for a while. As this is currently the only fight that we seem to have on the track. As this race has appeared to have gone into a time trial mode, where the drivers are trying to lap as fast as possible. Nui going a bit wide on the exit of that turn 3. maybe understeering a bit towards the mid corner. But still being very close, very, very close to WMDR Martin. And as you can see here, these two drivers are taking very, very different line. WMDR Martin taking a bit more of a compromised approach, so he can park it as close to the apex as possible to keep Nui from actually having any chance to overtake him. But he must be sweating in that cockpit of that Lambo with the Audi of Nui being so close behind him for so long. And WMDR Martin sliding a bit, and Nui losing it out of the hairpin. And possibly coming under attack from Smolda now, who has gotten very, very much closer to championship leader Nui at the moment. With Marley taking some very small bites out of the lead that Ablator has built so far over the race. So very soon we might see Marley coming into attacking range, and Ablator actually having to defend that first position from the man who's currently second in the driver standings. You can see we currently have no close battles on track, as there are no exclamation points shown by my race director screen. And as such, I believe we should follow the man who is currently setting the fastest laps of the race, namely Marley. Let's have a look and see how he's driving. Taking a bit out of that lead that Ablator has built. Ablator seemingly struggling at this stage of the race, losing quite a lot of time to Marley. Last lap, of course, 0.3 seconds, and this lap possibly more. As it seems he does get a better run out of the exit of the final corner, and does have higher straight line speed, it looks, as the Merc is in fact the more powerful car, and I do not believe that Circuit de Catalunya is at a very high altitude. So, even so, as the Lamborghini is not a turbocharged car, the deficit that both cars would have should be very close. With Marley taking another 0.2 seconds out of the lead that Ablator has built. Currently just trying to close that gap as much as he can to reel that Mercedes from Ablator in and possibly have a look at winning his first race in AOR. In AOR GT3 Tier 2. With Shaggy Dan now being 14 seconds behind and Shooter 18 seconds behind. Shaggy Dan lapping fairly consistently in the 40s, very low 46 second range, it seems. With Shooter actually being a bit faster on the last lap, so we could see Shooter coming close to Shaggy Dan and trying to go for that last podium position in the later stages of this race. But currently with Marley just being very, very consistent and trying to make that Lambo work for him. Possibly losing a bit of time on this lap compared to losing 0.2 seconds against Ablator on this lap, who has now set a 1:45.4. These guys outclassing most of the other drivers in terms of raw pace at the moment. With Ricky Brush actually having set a 1:45, and Clown also in the 45s, but in the very, very medium section, as it looks like that all of the drivers are currently in almost autopilot time trial mode. currently we have very, very, very little action going on. Let's have a look up in the midfield. As the field has spread to about 3 seconds of each driver being off one another. The exception being the very first two, who are 15 seconds ahead of Shaggy Dan, who's been driving a very stable race. Started the race in, I believe, 11th position, or in 10th position possibly, and moving up to 3rd. WMDR Martin. And Newey going actually a bit wide on the exit of that downhill left-hander. Possibly having to slow down so he doesn't get a penalty on the start, on the back straight. Gosku having received a penalty as well. Gosku now being the first car to be lapped. A very good race for him in the opening stages, but after that mistake in P2, he seems to have not had the best of luck, as he's been handed down into 15th position, which is truly a shame, as he was running very stable, consistent lap times while he was still in that 2nd position. Seemingly struggling at this stage of the race, though. With Ablator now coming into the first piece of traffic, we'll see if he actually loses time or if Marley gets stuck up behind Gosku more than Ablator does. Catalunya being a great track to test, or great track as it is used for testing the Formula 1 cars, due to the high tire wear nature of it and the corner layouts that it has. It is the perfect, at least in my opinion, the perfect baseline setup track. As such, if you are trying to find a baseline, a good starting point for a car to tune a car to, I do believe this is one of the tracks that you might want to have a look at, as it has a good mix of high speed and low speed left and right hand corners, as well as some fairly decent straights. Gosku now letting Ablator and Marley pass, possibly only Ablator so far. Marley being less than a 10th faster on that last lap than Ablator. Now coming up on Gosku. Let's see where Gosku decides to give Marley that room. With Smolda actually now being fairly close to Newey. We might see some action again with the Lambo. Now being in the slipstream of that Audi. The Lambo, I do believe, is a bit of a faster car than the Audi is. So Newey will have to fight to keep that position. With Ticklish Picklewickle now coming into the pits as well. Possibly coming to repair some of the damage he has on his rear end, it looks like. As it does seem a bit... It has received a kiss from another car. As for Howie coming into the pits as well. Clown now up into 10th position. Let's hope he has a good recovery drive from here on out. Smolder still being fairly close to Newey. And as such, I do believe we will stay with this battle for a while if Smolder can keep it in the window. With Newey actually having received a penalty at this point in at this stage of the race as well. Possibly for going wide on the exit of one of the corners, leading up to this back straight, in which the game does tend to give some slight 1 or 2 second penalties. Currently, drivers with penalties are Shooter, Newey, Ricky Brush, and Gosku. But Smolda not actually being close enough to make anything work against Nui. But possibly being close enough that if he keeps this gap up to the end of the race, he could possibly be handed that 6th position if it were to finish like this, as Nui has possibly received a 1 and or 2, or not and or, but a 1 or 2 second time penalty. Do not believe we can... we can actually see what penalties drivers have received, as we can see Shooter with a 2 second, Nui with a 1 second, Ricky Broche and Gosku with a 1 second respectively as well. And Nui actually able of opening that gap a bit so that he doesn't have to defend from Smolda, it seems. With Shooter also seemingly not being able to close up that gap to Shaggydan. The two drivers lapping almost identical lap times, only separated by about 1/10 of a second. And my director deciding to show me something that isn't there. Abator has just lapped S4Howie, it seems, and is now coming close to lapping Mickesby, with Marley now being only 2 seconds off of him. Like I said before, Marley just taking a bit away every lap or so of time, and possibly coming into the window of attacking Ablator in the next 10 to 15 laps. If he does not get held up by S4Howie, who seems to be actually doing so at the moment, as Marley is now very close to him. But S4Howie makes room around the outside of that long right-hander. Well, it does look like Marley has lost some time, because as S4Howie did not actually go off of the racing line, and Marley actually going a bit wide in the exit of that that chicane, that final chicane, and possibly having to lift a bit. Yes, Marley having to lift a bit as to not get a penalty. And now being 3 seconds behind Ablator again, and S4Howie losing control out of turn 4 and losing turn 1 and losing his position to Gosku. Very unfortunate events for S4Howie right now. Currently with not much action on the track, except for Marley having lost a lot of that time that he's worked so hard for making up. At the moment, it looks like he can only hope for a mistake from Ablator, as Ablator is truly driving a great race at the front. Very stable, very controlled at the moment, not making any large mistakes. Maybe a bit smaller ones, as he has in fact lost out on a few laps, it had seemed, but none of them large enough to put him under fire from Marley. WMDR Martin now being close to Shooter. It seems that Shooter has actually lost a lot of time on Shaggy Dan, as he was only 3 seconds behind, but is now more than 10 seconds behind Shaggy Dan. And possibly being attacked by a WMDR Martin very soon, which would be... And WMDR Martin going around the inside after a mistake and deep braking from Shooter, and WMDR Martin goes past into 4th position. I cannot stop wondering how high will WMDR Martin go this race. Seemingly, Shooter has some front-end damage as well. It wouldn't be a surprise if he were to pit now, and he does exactly that. Deciding not to drive around with a damaged car and taking the line into the pits. WMDR Martin now in 4th position, coming up from 17th to 4th. With Shooter being the first of the quote-unquote lead group to have pitted his car. We shall go on board with WMDR Martin and see how he's faring at the moment. It does indeed look like WMDR Martin is driving with a stick or a mouse, as the movement of his avatar is fairly janky, which makes his position and his speed all the more impressive. So far, a great drive from him. Nui still being fairly, possibly having a bit more pace at the moment. Maybe looking to come close, having passed Smolder at one point, it seems. No, not having passed Smolder. As for Howie now going into the pits again, it seems, as I do believe he's already pitted once before. Interesting concept. He might actually have received damage that forced him to do that. With his car being stopped in front of the pits, possibly. He might have a connection issue. Or this is just a bug on my end. It seemed like a bug on my end. Oblatorn actually at the moment not losing any time to Marley. Keeping that lead to a good 3.5 seconds. Still very stable, controlling this race. Marley now coming up on a lapped Mickesby. Trying to actually get some of that slipstream down the start-finish straight to maximize the speed that he has and possibly gaining a bit of time that he otherwise would not have gained on Oblator. Shooter now having been lapped as well, it seems, as he seems to have had a very, very long pit stop, so there was seemingly quite a lot of damage to his car. He is now in 13th position, but he might very well gain back a lot of that time once everybody else starts pitting. We are currently on lap 33 of 52, watching the current race leader, Oblator, controlling the race, as we currently have no further battles on track. As it's right now, Nui has actually closed down the gap to WMDR Martin quite a bit. And is possibly looking either to pick up the slipstream or very much go past WMDR Martin as he sits now. Nui would have to gain a 1 second gap if he were to finish in front of anyone, as he currently has a 1 second time penalty. Again, WMDR Martin currently being the hero of this race, driving up from the very, very back of the field in 17th position to currently 4th position. As it seems, the front is very much so spread out that it does not look like we'll see a change in position with the first 3 drivers, at least for the foreseeable future. Towards the end of the race, we might see Marley gaining time on Oblator. As for now, there is quite a stalemate going on the front of this grid, on the front of this pack, with Nui closing down that space between him and WMDR Martin at the moment, trying to make anything work to get into that 4th position, get as many points as he has so he can keep that championship lead and or extend it by as much as he can, as currently his rivals Marley in 2nd and Shaggydan in 4th, in 3rd position, would be getting more points than he is at the moment. Again, Nui being our current championship leader, followed by Marley in 2nd, Clown in 3rd, and Shaggydan in 4th. Although having a comfortable, I believe, 18-point lead over Marley at the moment, this lead would shrink a bit if Marley could actually gain this time on Oblator and go for the race win. Again, Nui also being the only driver this season so far to have won 2 races. Marley, though, having finished 2nd twice in a row, I do believe, both in Donington Park and at Brno, finishing 2nd behind Nui and in Donington Park, and 2nd behind Clown at Brno. Clown taking his first victory this season after having some pit stop issues in the first half. During the first round at Sonoma, his pit team would not come out, so he had to pit twice. And during the round at Donington Park, his pit team decided not to put him on the wet weather tires when he had decided to 3 different times. As such, Clown, who was running at the front during Donington Park, did not get the race when he's very, very much was looking forward to. But he did have Retribution at Brno, taking a very, very dominant first place victory there. Clown in 9th position at the moment, also having received a penalty, it seems. Possibly a 1 second penalty. Yes, a 1 second penalty. Clown lapping 45.9s and 45.2 on this lap. Dakuza being a bit faster than that. Dakuza also having a bit of trouble at the start of this race. With, I do believe there was contact between him and another driver, making him lose out quite a lot of positions. With Nui still being very close behind WM Martin, seemingly having the higher pace as he keeps on getting close to WMDR Martin, but not having enough pace to actually make a move work, as the dirty air keeps him far enough away in the corners for him not to have enough speed on the straights to make a move down the inside or outside of WMDR Martin. So at the moment, Nui has to hope for a mistake on Martin's end, which has not happened so far this race yet, as WMDR Martin has been driving a very, very, very solid race and has shown some incredible defense against Nui earlier this race as well. With both of the cars now on the start-finish straight, I do believe the Lamborghini being a bit faster in a straight line again, and Nui just picking up that toe from Martin. Both cars mechanically being fairly similar, I do believe, as the Audi and the Lamborghini both share the same V10 engine. And at least they do so in the road car versions. WMDR Martin actually going a bit wide on that turn 5 exit, possibly giving Nui some room to make something work, but not enough. Although Martin goes wide on the exit of that corner and might have lost a bit of speed up into the top hill right-hander, which might lose him some time. Going a bit wide, and Nui having a great toe and great exit, trying to go around the outside, braking into the hairpin, and Martin slides a bit under braking and just tabs Nui to keep that position. Some very, very hard racing between these two. It does not look like either of them received any damage. We'll have to see after the race how this will end. But currently, the only action we're seeing on the track as Nui now dives into the pits, not wanting to lose any more time between WMDR Martin. Now Shooter being very close to Mickesby, so Shooter trying to make up for that time he had lost due to the damage he has on the front. As it looks right now, the car does look to have damage, but you can be sure that he had jumped into the pits right after having received it. At least that's what it looked like, and having repaired the damage as well. So the models on the director's side do not get repaired, which is a shame for me, as I do not know if a car has received damage before or after pit stop, but we can make a smart guess that this has already been repaired. Well, Shooter going very wide on the exit of that top-end right-hander. Now letting off of the throttle a bit as to not get another penalty. As we have to remember that this is indeed a fight for position. Mickesby has pitted already, I believe, as well as Shooter. So Mickesby is currently on track in front of the man who was running in 4th position until he was overtaken by WMDR Martin on the lap that he had made the mistake and possibly hit a barrier. Shaggy Dan, very far in the back there, being 21 seconds behind Oblator, who has actually widened the gap to Marley to 5 seconds already. So Oblator possibly looking to extend that gap a little bit before he actually dives into the pits, with Shaggy Dan now coming onto the screen. With Shooter making himself very wide in the mirrors of that Renault, trying to force Mickesby into a mistake. And Mickesby possibly making one right here, as his exit out of that corner did not seem very good. If Shooter can make it work through the upper right-hander, as it looks like he does, he might have to might have the luck to have a look around the inside of Mickesby. It does not look like his BMW has the raw pace to match that Renault on the straights at the moment. It might be that Mickesby is running less downforce than Shooter. And Mickesby actually going very wide on that exit right there, going a bit into the gravel and losing quite a bit of time, which might put him into position to be to lose that position into turn 1 as Shooter gets a good exit out of the final corner and now can pick up a draft behind that Renault. Possibly the Renault, like I said, having less downforce and just being faster on the straights, and that is what it looks like. But Shooter actually looks up the inside, shows himself in the mirror, but does not go for the move. And Mickesby actually making a mistake under the exit of turn 1 and into turn 2, which puts Shooter around the outside of turn 3. The outside not being the grippiest part of the track. They are side by side into possibly turn 4, with Shooter going around the inside into turn 4. Can he make that move stick? And we can't see it at the moment, with Shooter going and Mickesby going side by side still into turn 5. Shooter braking a bit later, giving Mickesby that room that he deserves, and Shooter getting a better exit out of that corner. Now taking that position. Mickesby might still be alongside him, and he is still alongside Shooter, but Shooter now has the inside line and makes that move stick. But he might just go under fire from Mickesby on the straights, as that Renault seems to have quite a bit of more pace on the straights. But Mickesby probably losing out on the exit of that top hill right-hander, and Shooter now possibly having the pace to just cut himself off, and Mickesby not being able to do anything about it. But Mickesby fighting for that position very much. Nui actually falling on a 9th position, as it looks like that he has pitted. Yes, he has indeed pitted, as he ran up behind WMDR Martin. Him now setting 1:45.7s with WMDR Martin's involved 45.8. So if WMDR Martin needs to pull out that pace if he wants to get out of the pits in front of Nui. Marley now being only 4 seconds behind Ablator again, so possibly picking up the pace yet again, or Ablator maybe getting stuck a bit in traffic, as he has just lapped Ticklish Picklewickle, who's currently in 11th. Currently, again, after the fight between Shooter and Mickesby, not much going on track. Yeah. What we have to take into account, though, is that the pit stops on the Mercedes-AMG do seem to be a bit slower than on some of the other cars. So Ablator does indeed have to make up a bit of time before he can actually pit, as he might lose some time doing so compared to some of the other cars. Ablator starting this race in what looks to be 5th position, so making up possibly 4 positions actually, as Baratti's did not start this race. Just in front of Shooter, Ablator making the best of his fairly good starting position and showing some very strong pace. going very aggressive into that right-hander. As you can see, the car just fully wheel drifting on the exit a bit outward and then closing up on a second apex. Ablator just managing that gap to Marley, it seems. Marley not being able to catch up much or gain much time on Ablator. Clown in 8th position now, currently 3rd in the championship standings. If this is his finishing position, he might well take quite a hit and drop down a bit on the order of the drop down on Shaggy actually going to what was I going to say? Drop down the order of the championship standings, especially behind his teammate who is fairly close behind him, and I believe only 8 points behind him in the championship. Currently in 3rd position. Now going into the pits, as we only have 10 laps of this race remaining. Shaggy Dan now in 4th position, as we can see him going into the pits right here. In 5th position now, as WMDO Martin and Smolna have now overtaken him, but we have to remember they have not yet pitted, and they still need to do so, as well as do some refueling. We have to remember is that in these 90-minute races that we have 2 of this season, one of them was, and there seems to be an issue for Shaggy Dan as he can't get his car started, as the Lollipop Man has actually pulled up the Lollipop, but Shaggy Dan is not taking the car out of the pits. So he might have gotten stuck in the pits, which would be a terrible, terrible thing for him to happen to him, as he was running in 3rd, the best position he's had thus far this season. And Ablator now coming into the pits as well. Let's see what Marley does. Marley actually decides to stay out and takes over the virtual lead of this race, but we have to remember that he also still has to pit. Still having left 4 liters in his tank. He probably decided to pit at the end of this lap. Shaggy Dan actually having left the pits now, being behind Nui, who pitted earlier than he had, so losing quite a lot of position. It looks like there was some sort of issue possibly with his pit stop, and Nui profiting from that quite a bit. As I do not believe Clown and Ricky Brosh have pitted yet, but Nui having done so already. Smolda now coming into the pits as well. Let's see where he comes out. If he actually comes out in front of Shaggy Dan, as he was quite a bit behind him when he first, when Shaggy Dan first came into the pits. Dakuza now being close to Madster, but Madster coming into the pits as well. I do not believe Dakuza has pitted yet either. Oh, but it does look like he actually has, as he still has quite a lot of fuel left in his tank. So Dakuza is officially in 4th position. And Ablator is officially still in 1st, as WMDR Martin still has to pit, and Marley still has to pit as well. This is where things get interesting, as we might see some battles coming as cars come out of the pits. Ricky Brush actually having pitted already and being in 8th position, and he has enough fuel to go and attack Smolda, who now also has pitted. So quite a lot of these drivers already having pitted, with Clown also already having pitted, it seems, being in 5th position now. So Shaggy Dan being officially in 9th position, having made an error at his during his pit stop, or something similar, having lost quite a lot of space to a lot of the drivers, it seems. They must have pitted very early when I was not paying attention. Marley and WMDO Martin now coming into the pits. Ablator now being in 2nd, and Marley just coming out of the pits. Can he actually make it down the straight before Ablator overtakes him? No, he can't. And WMDO Martin in the pits as well. Very long, very slow drive for him to get to his box. Dakuza will surely overtake him. And Clown might overtake him as well. There must have been some very early pit stops in this race that I did not pay attention to due to crashes or contact between different cars. With Arbiter still being in first, but Marley actually having made up about a second during that pit stop phase, it seems. With Dakuza being in third now, 18 seconds behind, in a spot in which Shaggy Dan would have been had he not had pit stop issues, it seems, as he was about 20 seconds behind the lead car. So Dakuza now being in third position, and Clown, whom I assumed was having a bad race, and he spins down into turn 5, now being overtaken by Nui, not having the greatest race of his life, and as well as WMD Martin, and bogging down the car twice before he can get it started. Possibly coming under attack from Smolda and Ricky Brush, who is now attacking Smolda himself. So I was quite wrong that some of these drivers were having issues as they were very far back in the fields. It looked like they had done very early pit stops. And as I'm told now, Dan had to take a pee break, which is why he lost quite a lot of time during his pit stop, which is very unfortunate, as he was running a great race and possibly well enough to go onto his first podium position during an AOR Tier 2 Season 10 race. With Ricky Brush still being very close behind Smolda, and as we have it now, there is some good action as Smolda is trying to keep up with Clown, who seems to have the highest pace of these drivers. Ricky Brush being very close behind that. Possibly having a look down the inside into turn 1 of Smolda, but as both of them seem to be getting a tow, it doesn't look like he can make anything work. With Smolda seemingly closing the gap during the corners, and Clown just cutting away a bit on the straights. This is a nice change of pace, as we hadn't seen very many battles for a fairly long time during this race. As it looks at the moment, we have a podium order of Ablator, Marley, and Dakuza. Ablator driving a very dominant race so far, coming up from 4th position on the grid, I believe, up into first, and then leading pretty much the entire race there. After having overtaken Gosku on what I remember as lap 1 or lap 2. Gosku currently in 14th position. Having some very bad luck spinning out and losing quite a lot of positions during the early to middle stages of this race, but running very consistently and very solidly before that. Smolda still being fairly close to Clown, and Ricky Brush still being fairly close to Smolda. We will stay with these drivers and see if we'll have a dogfight for 6th position, it seems. As Ricky Brush goes very far on the outside of the exit and actually loses some time. It looks like he's actually hit the grass a bit and lost quite a bit of time sliding around. It might be that he's overheated his tires on the very long turn 3, which is a right-hander. Indeed, what a race. Some of these drivers had seemingly some issues in the very early stages and had pitted without me knowing it, and have now come back into the front of the pack. Although Ablator and Marley still being very much in the front from almost the very beginning. There were quite a lot of battles at the beginning, so it was difficult to watch for cars going into the pits, and I do apologize for that. But as it is now, it looks like Clown is able to pull a bit of a gap to Smolder, and Smolder not being able to match the pace of that Audi. Losing a bit of time every lap, it seems. But it looks like Ricky Bro still hasn't given up. Shaggy Dan now in 9th position, also having received a penalty. Shaggy Dan with a 1 second time penalty. Currently with Nui, Clown, Ricky Brosh, and Shaggy Dan on as well as Goska with a 1 second time penalty, and Shooter with a 3 second time penalty. And as it seems, the pack of 3 that we've had has been pulled apart by quite a bit, with Ricky Bros possibly looking to close that gap to Smolder again. But currently, it does appear like that we will not see any change of positions for the foreseeable future, as we only have 3 laps left, and Ableton is in the lead in the lead of lap 49. With Marley only 3.5 or 3.4 seconds behind him. With seemingly almost all the drivers lapping 145s at the moment, with only Nui and WMD Martin in the 46s of the first 11 drivers. Shooter with a 146.3, and the last 3, Mikas B. Gosku and S4 Howie, lapping 47s. Smolder and I actually having closed up the gap to Clown a little bit again. Let's have a look if he can make anything work, or if Clown makes a mistake. Ricky Bro seemingly closing that gap little by little as well. but possibly not fast enough to actually have a chance of attacking Smolder or Clown in the last few laps that we are on right now. Currently on lap 50 of 52 of the AOR GT3 Project Cars 2 GT3 Tier 2 league. This is race 7 at Catalunya. And we are currently watching the man in third in the standing, or driver's standings, Clown. Clown seemingly being able to pull away again by a tiny bit, so that my director does not show them be fighting for position at the moment. Currently being on lap 51, so there's only 2 laps to go until possibly Abelter can take home his first, I do believe, his first victory this season. Let's pull up this map and have a look. Marley is now only 2 seconds behind, but that seems to be just an illusion as they were going through the chicane at the end of the 3rd sector. Marley 3 seconds, actually 3 seconds behind Ablator. Now coming onto the last lap, let's have a look. With Ablator driving a superb race thus far, not making any large mistakes that would have cost him a position. Going past Gosku at the very beginning, I believe on lap 2, and just trying to take it home from there through consistency and pace. Very good drive on his end. Marley behind him, as well, as Marley had started off much further back, I do believe in 11th position, as my table is not the most accurate, as some drivers did not start. He would have started, I do believe, in 12th or 11th position. So a very good drive from Marley. Again, the reverse grid being quite confusing, especially if some of the drivers do not show or decide to have other things going on and can't race today. But I think we managed fairly well, and Ablator comes across the line on lap 52 to take home his first victory in the Project Cars 2 AOR GT3 League in Tier 2. Marley coming home in a very close second. Again, this is his second place in a row. A superb drive from him. If there's one man we can define as consistency at the moment in this league, it would probably be him. Dakuza coming home in 3rd behind them, followed by Nui, who now passes the finish line, and WMDR Martin, as well as Clown in 6th, Smolda in 7th, Ricky Broche in 8th, and Shaggy Dan in 9th position. Matster comes home in 10th. All in all, a solid result from him. And Ticklish Pickle Wickle in 11th. Shooter is currently 12th, and seemingly the last man to have crossed the finish line, as all the other drivers had been lapped and crossed the finish line 1 lap down. A great race so far. A great race from Abletor. Very dominating presence on track at the moment. And I'll go and see if I can get some of the top 3 to have an interview. So I'll be right back. Alright, as it is right now, we can't get first place finisher Ablator or second place finisher Marley to have an interview with us, but we do have third place finisher Dakuza. So, Dakuza, tell us, how did it happen? How did... I missed you pit very early in the race, and seemingly you had some good pace there.
Yeah, I don't know what happened in the first lap. Somebody hit me from behind, and I spun. And after that, I had very bad VR stutters, so I decided to pit early.
And you made it home in third place, so I guess that was the right strategy call. Anything else you want to say to the viewers, or?
Not really. It was actually a pretty boring race for me, but I want to congratulate Marley and Oblitor. They had excellent pace. I had no chance with them.
All right, thanks. Okay. All right. And with that, we are done with the AOR Project Cars 2 GT3 Tier 2 race at Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. We will see you next week for our round 8 race. And until then, stay frosty, friends.